Frank Goes Downstairs is a brilliant episode of Everybody Loves Raymond, and I think it might be my favourite from season 6 so far. This is the 6th episode of the 6th season. It's directed by Gary Halvorson, and as always, there will be spoilers from now as I go through the episode and share some thoughts. And it starts off in the dark. Ray and Debra are in bed or on the bed, and then they're on the floor. It's a sex-related injury. Debra's hurt her shoulder. Ray has hurt his wrist. To the next scene, Ray is kind of bragging to the guys about this. He's clearly wanting them to ask about it. He mentions it's a sex injury, his first sex injury, and then Frank comes over and suddenly he doesn't want to say anything. He doesn't want his father to know he got an injury during sex. So he tells Frank that he fell down the stairs. And Debra fell down the stairs as well. So if he sees that she has a sore shoulder, that's what it is. No need to ask her any questions. Because obviously he hasn't told Debra that he's making up this lie. Not that I think Debra would tell the truth to Frank anyway. At least not outright. I don't know. But the next thing we see, and this is so sweet, Frank in this episode was just so amazing from start to finish. And then the next scene, Ray and Debra come into the house and Frank's fixing the stairs. I don't necessarily know what he's doing because there wasn't actually a problem with the stairs anyway. Plus, usually when somebody falls down the stairs, it's not because there's a problem with the stairs. It's because they've missed their footing. But anyway, he's clearly wanting to help and he's working on the stairs. Marie comes over with some water for Frank, even though there's a tap at the house, or a faucet if you like, and she asks about this injury. And she's so confused. But I have to say, I don't understand the confusion. She just cannot understand how Ray and Debra both fell down the stairs at the same time. And they come up with this ridiculous line that they were... they have this tradition where they race around the house. Some days they race around the living room. Some days, on Fridays, they race up and down the stairs. I don't understand why they have to make it so elaborate. It's funny. I really thoroughly enjoyed it. But they could have just said, oh, Ray fell and knocked into Debra. He lost his footing. He stumbled. Debra didn't see it coming. She was just the step behind him and she fell over. It's so easy. It's so easy to do that. I don't understand why Marie was so confused. But nevertheless, it was certainly more funny this way. And then Frank fell through the stairs. It was very, very dramatic and very well executed. And Marie said, I'm coming, and Frank said, I'm in enough pain. And then we cut to Frank in the hospital, which is not something I want to see. I don't want to see Frank in the hospital bed. But in general, he was in really good spirits, largely because he was receiving pain medication. But it's nice to see everybody there for him. And Marie's being unkind, blaming him for his injury, of course. And if Frank says, doctor, can I have this removed, referring to Marie, and then Marie asks the doctor about personality transplants. So it's nice to see they're both having digs at each other, but obviously it's still a very loving scene. We know their love language is insults, and obviously it's unhappy to see Frank like this, or I'm unhappy to see Frank like this, and Debra tells Ray, we can't have sex ever again. And her reason for this is because every time they do, she'll think of this lie and she'll see, and I quote, his little bald head dropping out of sight. Which actually is a perfect description for what happened. And it was just very funny. It made me laugh a lot. And then we have a scene that's just so beautiful. So beautiful. Ray goes to speak with Frank alone, and Frank is very relaxed on the pain medication, and he's really opening up to Ray, and he says to him, we're pals now, and getting a little emotional. And he talks about how when Ray moved across the road, he was really happy about it, and they could just come and go to each other's houses, nothing significant, just watching the game, just doing little things, playing pool. Somebody needs to buy a pool table. And it was just so beautiful and really emotional. And Frank, obviously having opened up with all of this, is really tugging at Ray's heartstrings and making Ray feel guilty for everything that happened. So he tells him the truth, that it was a sex injury. And Frank, well, first of all, Frank said that's a much better story than falling down the stairs. Why didn't you just tell me? And Ray said he didn't feel comfortable talking to Frank about that kind of stuff. And Frank said, and honestly it moved me a lot, and Frank said, but we're pals. And it just broke me. It was so beautiful. And it's just so lovely seeing this side of Frank. Granted, he has to be on pain medication for us to get to this point, but it was just so beautiful. I will say that the last scene I was worried was going to be something different, and I'll talk about that in a second, but I do think the last scene was a bit flat. It's not unusual, but it hasn't happened in a while. Often with Everybody Loves Raymond, not so much with this season. The last scene is just really weak. It just fizzled out. It never feels like a satisfying ending, very rarely. Season 6 actually hasn't been too bad with that, but this final scene, they were back at the house, and Frank was out of hospital, and Marie... Yeah, it's fine. I didn't mind it. It was an okay ending, but it just felt a little bit flat. But I was mostly relieved because I was actually thinking that in that scene, Frank would reveal that he couldn't remember that conversation with Ray. That might be a bit of a stretch, but obviously if he was on pain medication, he maybe wasn't fully focusing on what was happening. Maybe he wouldn't fully remember everything. Granted, I doubt the pain medication was that strong, but I was just concerned that we had this really beautiful, gorgeous conversation between Ray and Frank, and I was really worried that that final scene would be making a joke at what Frank had said because he couldn't remember it. But thankfully they did not go down that route, so even though the ending felt very flat, I was relieved that it didn't ultimately do what I was worried it was going to do, and I really appreciate that. It's a really brilliant episode. Frank is absolutely amazing. Debra's comment about his little bald head dropping out of sight. I had a lot of fun with it. I really enjoyed it. So some beautiful moments between Frank and Ray, and some comedy in there as well, as is usually the case, of course. So, needless to say, I'm rather happy with Frank Goes Downstairs. I think it's one of the strongest in a very long time. Probably the strongest from season 6 so far. I thought it was absolutely fantastic.